I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. This is an issue that's very important to all of us, to our children in Maryland and everywhere else in the country. So thank you all very much for being here. I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have Dr. Christopher Tenkin.
Good evening, everyone.
Ms. Sheila Kaplan. Dr. Terry Albin. Mr. Gary Brennan. Dr. Sandra Stotsky. And Mr. Emmett McRorty. I'd also like to recognize the committee that helped put this event together. Cindy Schaff, Pam Ward, Cindy Rose, and Jason Laird is unable to be here this evening. Now I'd like to invite Ms. Cindy Rose to the lectern to say a few words.
I'm going to apologize in advance. I have a bad cold, so if I cough through the middle of this, I apologize, and have my water so I don't have any Marco Rubio moments, so we should be good to go now. So, and before I get started, I do want to have a word for Jason Laird, who had to be here, couldn't be here because of a family commitment, and our prayers go out to Jason, Suzanne, and his family. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Your being here is a testament to how much we appreciate and care about education in Frederick County. I first got involved in education when my special needs son, Ben, was having a summer ride on the summer school bus for his education class, and that bus temperature reached 106 degrees that summer, and there was no air conditioning on those buses. Long story short is we got air conditioning for all those buses, and my point would be that one person can make a difference. So if you think that your one voice doesn't make a difference, I need you to stop, because we're here tonight because one person asked another person who asked another person to ask their community to get involved and try to inform their parents and their neighbors about a new education model called Common Core. What you might hear or what you may have heard is that Common Core is just standards, and that's not true. It's more than standards. If you look at the Maryland Race to the Top application, page 17, you will see that Maryland adopted the Maryland Common Core curriculum, the assessments, the teacher evaluation, the data collection, and some other things, and I'd call that a program. That's more than standards. And even if we're just standards, standards are important. Standards say what we will teach our children, and what we have control over now in the county is the curriculum, as well important, but what curriculum is how we're going to teach what others are telling us we're allowed to teach our children, and that's not acceptable to me. Another concern is the people designing Common Core, they don't know our children, they don't know my children, they don't know our community. I mean, look around you, there's moms and dads, and there's legislators, school administrators, and there's even our lovely Gary, our teacher union president. And Gary and I, although we may have some heated disagreements, we can still come together and sit at a table and look at each other, and we can discuss what our differences are, and we can take care of those. We can't do that with the creators of Common Core. They're nameless, faceless bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. who don't know us. They don't want to know us. So the people in this room should be the ones who are guiding our education, because these are our children. And as many as we are here tonight, not one of us had a say in what went on with Common Core, other than Dr. Stotsky, but we're not going to blame her because she's been trying to get the news out about why it might not be good for our children. So what a farm girl here in Frederick wants and needs to learn is different from what a girl in Harlem wants and needs to learn. Why? Because they're not common. And what inspires a union worker's son in Michigan and what inspires a surfer son in Hawaii, those are different things. Why? Because they're not common. Children are like snowflakes. Each one is precious and unique. Too precious and unique to leave to reformers who've never met them, they've never looked in their eyes, and they don't know what they're dreaming of for their futures. Common Core seeks to create the dream for the child instead of letting the dream unfold in an uncommon course. And as a mom, I will not stand by and let this happen without a fight. So with the help of our friends in our community, we've gathered some experts here who will help shed some light on Common Core, and maybe by the end of the evening, you might know if it's good or not good for you. Some will have good things to say, and others will tell us that we have nothing to fear. So common, is that what we dream of for our children? Commonality? Common Core will help a child build a box, but a traditional education will tell a child to build a skyscraper. Common Core will have a child painting in black and white, but a traditional education uses every imaginable color in the rainbow. Common Core limits the imagination and the creativity of an inquisitive child and assigns it the tasks it needs for survival. Survival's great. If that's all you want is survival, Common Core will create that life for your child. Traditional education lets our children build the lives that they want to lead, not lives designed by others. So when our speakers have finished here tonight, and you'll be able to decide for yourselves if common is what you want for your children, and if you can't know by what they have to say tonight, there's questions and there's information that was handed out to you so that you can get in touch with them later on and have your questions answered. I thank you for coming out, and with that, I give it back to Darren.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm sorry about your cold. Thank you for not coughing on the microphone. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. He's an assistant professor of education administration at the Seton Hall University in the College of Education and Human Services Department of Education Management, Policy, and Leadership. He has a public school administration experience as a pre-K through 12 assistant superintendent, a middle school principal, director of curriculum and instruction, and elementary school assistant principal. He is currently the editor of the American Association of School Administrators Journal of Scholarship and Practice and the Kappa Delta Pi Record. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Christopher Timken.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Cindy. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. As Darren said, I have multiple experiences in education, starting as a second grade teacher about 21 years ago, and now at the university level at Seton Hall University. I think, but more importantly, I'm also a father of two young girls, kindergarten and second grade. So I'm intimately involved with this issue from all sides of the table, from the education side, from the parent side, and I'm also a town councilman in my town, so we deal with the school on other issues. So I've been dealing with Common Core in all different angles. In terms of how I look at public education, I use two lenses. The first is an empirical lens. I like to see evidence of things that we're doing with kids. So I believe that any major policy that we subject children to should have some evidence to support its effectiveness. And that's because children don't have a seat at the policy-making table. Education policy is thrust upon them, and they're compelled to take it because they're compelled to attend. Therefore, I believe we should only implement policies that have been tested and demonstrated effective with kids, and also demonstrated not to do harm for children or educators. And so the other lens I use to look at these things is a lens of liberty and justice for all. It's an equity lens. In terms of equity, I believe we should implement public education policies that allow all children to develop to the best of their potential, to pursue their passions and unique talents, so as to become contributing members of society. So really what I want to see from public education is a system that allows kids to develop themselves, develop their culture, develop their community, so that they can be productive citizens for their country. So you can understand with that background and the lenses that I use, that I have some questions and deep interest in a curriculum that's set to standardize and centralize public education. I've been writing about the Common Core since 2009. I wrote an article, National Curriculum Standards, Let's Think It Over. And in that article I raised two issues, the empirical issue, where's the evidence, and also a cultural issue. And I continue to raise those issues today. All my comments tonight come from my writings and from my book. If you want to access any of those, they're on my website, christinkin.com. There's probably 8 or 10 articles just on the Common Core alone there that you can download for free and you can use with your legislators, your bureaucrats, and your school administrators. So of course, can't cover everything tonight, but I will provide you with some useful data that you can use with those people when you're talking to them about this issue. So let's start with the argument. The major argument made in favor of the Common Core is that America's children are somehow competitively lagging behind international peers. And usually what they mean by that is they're not ranking as high as other countries on international tests. So the second part of that argument is that lag on international tests somehow translates into economic strength. So it's a double-barrel argument. Because we're not scoring well on international tests, the economy is somehow going to suffer down the line. So the meaningfulness of that lag, argument A, is really only important if argument B is true. If there is a connection between international test rankings and economic strength. So let me dispense with that one right away. None of the scores or ranks from any international test have been validated to represent the overall quality of a country's education system, nor have they been connected with the prediction of economic success. Now, that's not me saying that. That comes right out of the technical manuals from the people who make these tests. The two most common tests that you probably hear about is this thing called the PISA, Program for International Student Assessment, and the TIMSS, Trends in International Math and Science Study. Those are the two big ones. And the PISA results are set to come out in 2013, December 9th, I believe, so hold on to your hat for those. But in terms of what PISA actually says about their tests, I'm going to read right out of their technical manual, page 171. For those of you who want to fall asleep fast at night, you might want to look that up. If a country's scale scores in reading, scientific, or mathematical literacy are significantly higher than those in another country, it cannot be automatically inferred that the schools in one country are better than those in another. So the people who are making this test tell you, you can't use this test to judge the quality of education. And one of the reasons for that is because one test given to just 5,000 kids, that's the sample for these international tests, 5,000 students from one country, and many times that student sample is not representative of the country. For example, some countries don't include students with special needs, they don't include their language learners, so on and so forth. You can't possibly use a test like that to explain the quality of a country's education system or predict economic success. There's just too many issues. So another example of why these tests are not good predictors of quality or economics is curriculum alignment. We find this on the TIMSS. 33% of the grade 8 mathematics problems on the TIMSS require student knowledge of algebra and functions. Now, in the US, some of our students don't get to that material until 9th or 10th grade. So what the TIMSS scores really tell us, and they tell us this quite clearly, our kids do great on content that they've been taught, and not so well on stuff they haven't learned yet. That makes total sense. But even when the tests don't match our curriculum, we outperform the rest of the world when you compare apples to apples. And when the apples I'm talking about are the poverty apples. US schools that have kids, 10% of their kids or less are in poverty. Just like Finland, Denmark, Switzerland, Belgium, Norway, Germany, okay, all these other countries that outscore us. We score number 1 in the world in science literacy, and usually number 2 or 3 in the world in mathematics. So when you compare apples to apples, we're dominating the world on these tests. The problem is the bureaucrats don't use apples to apples comparisons. Furthermore, the claim of a relationship between international test rankings and economic strength is empirically bankrupt. There's no empirical evidence to support it. There's no consistent relationship between the ranks on these tests and any indicators of a country's economic wealth. Whether you use GDP, per capita GDP, PPP, whatever P you want to use, there's not a consistent relationship. What is interesting, though, with the new data that we're working with, we are finding a relationship that sometimes pops up that a country scores better when its economy was doing better before the test. And there's a lot of literature to support this idea that in a large economy like ours, in the G7 nations, that education needs the economy more than the economy needs education. And that's certainly the case in the US, and the data support that. But I want to dig a little bit deeper with you, and I want to look at some meaningful indicators of economic and education output to determine if we're really lagging in the areas that matter. So one of the things that I like to look at is this global economic competitiveness, and that's the major reason given for the Common Core. So let's ask the experts. Let's go to the World Economic Forum. Okay, they have something called the Global Competitiveness Index. And so the U.S. has ranked in the top 2 of all countries in the world during the last 8 out of 13 years on the Global Competitiveness Index. The reason we're number 8 this year is due to continued banking indiscretions in the financial sector and political gridlock in Washington. Those are the reasons given by the World Economic Forum. What about high school graduates? We're told we're not doing a good job with high school graduates. We need the Common Core to get students college and career ready. Well, actually, we have one of the highest percentages of high school graduates on the planet. We're ranked number 6th in terms of people who complete high school. Now, a completer is defined as someone who gets a high school diploma or the equivalent of that. We're ranked 9th in terms of graduate. Now, in this country, a graduate is defined as someone who graduates high school in 4 years. Keep in mind, in other parts of the world, they define a graduate as someone who graduates by the age of 25. So in some ways, we're being compared on a different scale with the rest of the world. But even with that different comparison, we're ranked 9th. Where do we stand with computer scientists and engineers? That's another thing that you hear all the time. We need more of them. Actually, we produce more engineers and IT computer scientists than we can employ. They're the larger portion of our graduates. In terms of bachelor's degree per million people, the U.S. has the highest number, 289 per million in computer science and engineering. India has 104, and China has 270. But remember, not all bachelor's degrees are created equal in China. And so there's some discrepancy in terms of the quality of those degrees. Are they 2-year degrees? Are they 3-year degrees? What kind of engineering degrees are they? But regardless, we still top the world there. Bachelor's degrees, we're told we need many more of those. Actually, there's only 8 other industrialized countries that have a higher percentage of their population with bachelor's degrees than we do. All of them, except Japan and the UK, have very small economies. We produce about 33% bachelor's degrees in this country, same as Japan, same as Australia. Poland has 37%, the Netherlands 38%, Korea 38%, and Norway tops the world. 46% of their population has a bachelor's degree. There's 5 million people in Norway. Okay, where I come from, we call that North Jersey. By the way, the core European Union average for bachelor's degrees is 20%. We sit at 33%. So what about creativity and innovation? Those are the major drivers of an advanced economy and an outgrowth of a quality education system. How are we doing there? One indicator to look at is Nobel laureates in the areas of chemistry, economics, literature, medicine, peace, and physics. There's been 839 laureates. The U.S. has 338 of those. The UK has the next highest amount, 119. India and Japan have 9 and 8. In terms of just Nobels in science, we have 305. The next closest, the UK, 94. What about utility patents? Now, utility patents are things that you care about. They're the things that make your life easier. We're not talking about bobblehead doll patents here. Utility patents are innovation patents. The United States produced 121,000 of those in 2012. The rest of the world, 132,000. Japan was our, next closest competitor, you can say, 50,000. So we almost tripled the output of utility patents with our next closest competitor. What about scientific papers? The U.S. produced over 3 million scientific papers in 2012. China produced 836, Germany 784,000, 771 in Japan, so on and so forth. You can see we're quadrupling the output of most countries in terms of scientific papers. Okay, here's one, entrepreneurship. We know how important entrepreneurship is for an economy. Well, on the Global Entrepreneurship Index, the U.S. ranks 3rd, behind Denmark, which I think is about 4 million people, and Canada. In terms of entrepreneurial aspirations, the United States ranks 1st in the world. So we have that attitude, we have that culture of innovation. China ranks in the bottom quarter of the world.
Entrepreneurial activities, that's the ability to take those aspirations and do something with them. We rank 6th in the world behind many small economies like Denmark, Ireland, Norway, Switzerland, and Sweden. China is, once again, near the bottom of the world. How about creativity? This is another thing that drives innovation, helps to drive entrepreneurship. The U.S. ranks 2nd in the world on the Global Creativity Index behind Sweden. Once again, Sweden's a very small economy, not our competitor. China ranks 58. Global Innovation Index, we rank 5th behind Switzerland, Sweden. China ranks 35th. So you can see on the things that matter, we're doing quite well. And we're doing all of that only being the 44th highest spending country in the world on education in terms of percent of GDP. We're 44 out of 163 countries. Finland's 33rd, Cuba's 2nd. Countries that spend about the same percentage of GDP as us are Ethiopia, France, Great Britain, Vietnam, Ghana, South Africa, Mongolia, and Saudi Arabia. And last time I checked any rankings, we're doing quite well compared to those competitors as well. So for me, the empirical data on the things that matter do not support a centralized curriculum. There's no connection between these test scores and other things. There is, of course, evidence that industrial trade policy is failing, but that's a discussion for another time. You know, when you talk about our diversity, we are a country that was born from local control. So I have to ask, what happened to our long history of local control and the role of public school as democracy's incubator? The Common Core is having an impact on that. You know, just from common sense, can just two subjects, math and language arts, prepare children to access thousands of college options or make them attractive to admissions officers who control those options? You know, what are students missing by being forced to focus so heavily on just 2 subjects? How can it be that future plumbers, airline pilots, filmmakers, engineers, doctors, how could it be that they all need the same curriculum in high school? You know, is the Common Core an improvement or an impediment? Well, for me, the empirical and cultural evidence do not support the proposed solution. The problem is not even identified correctly. So it seems that the evidence to support the Common Core is cracked when I look at it through my lenses, and I think that bureaucrats who are peddling these standardized solutions need to get their lenses adjusted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tenkin. I should have mentioned earlier, you have a notes section in your booklets, and we are going to have a half-hour session at the end of our speaking to do Q&A. So I think we're going to have some very compelling questions for these guys. I wasn't personally involved in putting this event together, and I'm kind of excited. I'm enjoying this. I hope everybody else is too. Our next speaker is a graduate from George Washington University and holds a master's in social work from Fordham University and a master's in information policy and records management from the University of Albany. She is an executive director with the Elaine and William Kaplan Family Foundation. She is an independent education and information policy researcher, publisher, consultant, program developer, and advocate for students' rights. In 2011, she launched the annual Education New York's national opt-out campaign to alert parents to their rights under FERPA to restrict third-party access to their children's information. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Sheila Kaplan.
Thank you. Is this a good volume? Yes? Good. How many people are confused about Common Core? Me too. These are the experts. I am not. I have questions. One of my best friends' job is to go around the United States and teach schools and educators about Common Core. And she's been doing that for a really long time, and I say, what is it? What is it that you do? And I don't have to know that. So then I said, well, do you think that there's a possibility that Common Core could at some point violate students' privacy? And she said, it could. I hadn't thought about that before. I still did not need to know about Common Core. New York City, I don't know if you followed In Bloom around the United States and New York City's woes. I live in Brooklyn, and I do not get involved with New York City schools or New York City politics because you just can't win. So they were looking at In Bloom and not making the connection that In Bloom is under the umbrella of Common Core. And I did not know that Common Core connected with In Bloom until I was looking one day at something called the Learning Registry Metatag Initiative. And what that is it says that all of the Common Core products have to be coded and aligned with the Common Core taxonomy. So there's certain words. And then I was reading more, and they were saying to the vendors, if you code your Common Core aligned products and you use these words, you will get the traffic on the internet. So I'm like, that doesn't sound very net neutral, because I look at net neutrality. And so I started looking, and then I came across something called the Learning Registry, which is funded by the Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Education, which is an odd combination. But the Department of Defense's role is now, the talk is, well, we're doing the Common Core for military families because they're moving around a lot. And I am sensitive to that. I have written on student mobility before, and it is a problem. Now, the military schools have adopted Common Core. So that's how I started looking at it, and I thought, this sounds like an antitrust. So I started going down that route, and just yesterday I was in Washington speaking to some attorneys, and they've said, you know what, the powers against this for Common Core are so strong, and antitrust is so hard to prove, because antitrust is very, very sensitive to anything that's innovative. And when you hear about Common Core, you hear about innovation, you hear about personalized learning, you hear about college career readiness. I don't know how they figured out what kids are going to be doing in 20 years from now for employment, but somehow they seem to think this is going to be doing it. So that's how I started looking at it. And then I realized that these same words, personalized learning, college career readiness, and innovation, are what they're labeling all the stocks in the stock market in the hedge funds. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. You know, that's not very good. So that's the part that I look at. I look at the data and how it's being handled. My biggest concern is I don't know much about the standards as far as what they're learning, if they're good, if they're bad. I don't really look at that. What I'm looking at is kids are going to be going home with tablets that have a camera and a microphone, that they're going to be transmitting the data by Wi-Fi that's going to be provided at home and in school and through AT&T. Well, so, you know, first I didn't think I had to know about Common Core, and I didn't think I was going to have to know about the FTC. Years ago, I had to learn about them. Now I'm saying, oh no, I need to know about the FCC. Well, in preparing for my meeting yesterday in Washington, you know, you go on these websites and they change every day. That's how fast it's changing. They're real good at that. The FCC is right in the thick of it. Who do you think's providing the connectivity from the home through AT&T? It's the FCC. So in meeting with the attorneys yesterday, they said, well, antitrust is really hard. We really think that this might be some kind of a public policy. So I am going to challenge all of you and ask all of you to think about situations where you know of someone who has data, maybe a mobile device that was lost that had sensitive information, because they say, well, what's the harm? When I started looking at student privacy in 2006, 8 years ago, and people would say, what's the harm? And I would say to places like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, well, do we need to have a bill that's named after a child that's harmed? Well, 6 years later, when people say to me, what's the harm? I say to them, if you have to ask, what's the harm of sending a child's home with a tablet, with a microphone and a camera in it, and transmitting it through Wi-Fi, you probably should not be in a decision-making position on education. So, as I said, these are the experts. I'm not going to speak long. I'm just going to tell you my concerns. I had mentioned the net neutrality. Now, what is that? The Learning Registry Metatag Initiative and the Learning Registry has said, we want to be the Dewey Decimal System for education content on the internet. And they did tell the vendors, if you tag it this way, you will get the traffic. And after you get the traffic, we have the Learning Registry, and teachers can go and they can talk about the Common Core state standard products, and if they like it or if they don't. So that to me is very, very scary. I have big concerns about that. And there's more. There's something called schema.org, and that's a certain markup that was approved just recently. And who do you think is involved with that? Google, Yahoo, Bing, and Yandex. And they have said, this is how you should tag it. Tag it, you'll get the traffic. So I find that concerning. That's something that bothers me. What I really think is going on, they had the recent rule changes to FERPA, and the definition of an education agency has been expanded. All of that stuff has been happening. A big part of this, though, is the interoperability. That was funded by Dell. Okay, he's trying to buy back his company now. I don't know why he's so intent upon it, but I think they're going for a process patent is what I really think what is happening. If you don't know what a process patent is, I'm not really good at that either, but I guess someone could probably explain it better than I, but it's just, here's the best way to get the information. Here's a really good process, and we're going to patent it because it's fantastic. I know you may hear the U.S. Department of Education or the government saying, oh no, this is not a national database. This is not a national database, and it's not. But they did put out something called the National Education Data Model, which they say doesn't have any data in it, but you might want to have your state database look like this for reporting. So none of it looks good to me, okay? My real specialty is opting out of student directory, and I'm not going to spend the time speaking about here. When the flag goes up, I may say a little bit more, but I do want to reassure people whose children do go to school in Frederick County. I just looked at your directory information policy, and it's excellent. Excellent, and so you can thank Dr. Albin over here for that. And I am looking to see if there's anything else that I think I know that might scare you. Basically is what it's coming down to. They say it's going to, Common Core is going to lessen the achievement gap. I don't think so, because the kids who are enriched are going to do well no matter what. They're going to excel. They're going to do fine on the college boards, which are going to be aligned. They're going to take the college boards, SAT tests beforehand, the training. Not only that, though their parents are the ones who are investing in the hedge funds with all the Common Core products. The race to the top money, stimulus money, can be used to buy these tablets. So it's kind of a big stretch to think that like the stock market could crash if we stop Common Core. You know, what's going to be happening there? But I just have to tell you that I have actually said to my friends who manage funds, say, hey, if I were you, I would kind of de-invest, whatever the word is, your clients from these Common Core products, because I plan on busting it. Seriously. Now, to go back to my meeting yesterday, they do not think that an antitrust is an easy way to go. So we have to do some kind of a public policy lawsuit, maybe a class action of some sort. It's very hard to do that in a federal court. They suggested maybe do it in something like California. I said to them, do you think it's something? And they said, well, you know what, we don't want to lose, and we don't want to, give our clients false hope. And I said to them, well, I'm not going to sit back and not do anything. And I just received an email from them, and they said, thank you so much. We have learned so much about Common Core that we did not know before, and we are going to work with you. So I would just like you to know I do not know about the standards. I just know about the data. I have huge concerns about it, and I'm not going to give up on trying to do something. I don't know what the solution is yet, but as I said, if anyone knows of any situation where a child used a computer, they lost it, the information was found, and the child was harmed. I mean, who wants to hear about it? I don't read those stories. Those are the stories I don't want to read about. So let me see if there's anything else. One more thing. Two things. Before my yellow piece of paper goes up. I do care very much about directory information. You are okay here in Frederick County. It's limited amounts you are giving out, but yet the information still can be sold. So you need to know if you don't opt out, that's public information that can be foiled and it can be sold. And even though you're okay here in Frederick, is it Frederick County? Mm-hmm. In Frederick County, they're not okay in other schools. So I left the items out there. I'm asking people, take the hats, put it on your head, don't put your face in it, keep it private, and spread it around, spread the word around. That's the only way that part is going to be protected. And I wrote a bill for that's actually, if you scan one of those things, it's linked on there. But I just recently finished a chief privacy officer at state education agencies bills. And I have to tell you, it's a good bill. And it's not because I wrote it. It's because it was written with the top privacy people in the United States. We can sit here as a panel, we can sit here as parents. Okay, we're there. We can sit here as parents, and I don't even remember what I'm going to say, so I'm just going to say goodbye because I have to get my car into the garage in Brooklyn by 12 o'clock tonight. Okay, so I loved coming here. I went to the mall. I hadn't been to a mall in a long time. I smelled grass on the highway, grass, green grass, on the way here. And thank you so much for inviting me. My contact information is all out there. I am very accessible. Please call me and share the word to opt out. And I'm going to do whatever I can about Common Core and protecting these data. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kaplan, for coming all the way down to speak with us today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I really had to get the car in the garage. Right, the park on the street. You don't want to walk around the streets.
You know, Ms. Kaplan brought up an interesting point about government. She acknowledged that in Frederick County, we're doing a responsible job of maintaining the private information of our students.
Sure.
But the data is there. And while the current administration may be doing a very respectable job of maintaining that information, we don't know who's going to be there in the future. We don't know who's going to be the custodian of that information in the future. So that, just one thing to please keep in mind as you're writing your questions down, how are these things being protected going forward? And maybe we'll learn more about that this evening. So thank you again.
That last thing, can I just, because one big question. Okay, thank you. The one thing I forgot to say was about the Chief Privacy Officer at the state education agencies. That was recommended by Joel Reidenberg, who is the expert on student data and longitudinal databases. We should not be worrying about this. There are people who are qualified, who should be overseeing this. They should be in the state education departments because that's where the longitudinal databases are. So look for the bill and, talk to your legislators about it, okay?
Thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Kaplan. Feel free to yell at me if I get off script too much. I know it's going to be a long night as it is. We're trying to keep things on track. So Cindy will definitely make sure that I behave myself up here. Okay, our next speaker has served as the superintendent for Frederick County Public Schools since July 2011. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education and Special Education, summa cum laude, from the College of Notre Dame in Baltimore. She has a master's degree in Administration and Supervision from Loyola College in Baltimore and a PhD in Measurement, Statistics, and Evaluation from the University of Maryland, College Park. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tara Albin.
Good evening. I really appreciate having the opportunity to be here with you and talk a little bit this evening. I'm not going to speak for the entire 15 minutes because I'm really here tonight because I want to listen and I want to understand what your concerns are. And the place I'm coming from this evening is to talk to you about what does Common Core mean right here in Frederick County Public Schools. What are we doing as we are working to align our curriculum with the state's Common Core standards? A lot of people have been talking about local control. In Frederick County Public Schools, we have a long tradition of excellence, and thank you, Dr. Tenkin, for acknowledging that public schools rock. I heard that data, and we do a really good job. And here in Frederick, it's not just the good job that we do with getting student achievement results, it's also the personal caring that we have for each and every one of our students. That's our tradition, and that is not going to change. We have been developing our own curriculum, using our own teachers for many years. That continues. So we have not given up the local control of our curriculum. We have always been asked to make sure that the curriculum we design aligns with whatever set of standards MSDE has put in place. And so once again, when the Common Core state standards came out, our staff started looking at those, and they decided that they liked a lot of what they saw. They saw an opportunity to go deeper and understand concepts more in mathematics. They saw an emphasis on speaking and writing. They saw STEM standards, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, that emphasized the need to have students collaborating, to become critical thinkers, to try to find multiple solutions to a problem. They found the things that our local business leaders have been telling me and our curricular leaders are exactly what they need for employees in our workforce in Frederick County. They talk to me about wanting students who become their employees to know how to work with a team. They want these students to be able to solve problems. They want to see them apply what they've learned in school to problems in the workforce. They want them to show up on time. Unfortunately, that isn't in the Common Core standards, but we work on that too. So as we listen to what our local business says, as we looked at the Common Core standards, our teachers began to look at, then how do we make this work in Frederick County? How do we assure that our students are able to meet this new set of expectations? And our teachers have actually been working on that for several years now. Because as Mrs. Rose indicated, Common Core is just one part of Maryland's new reform effort, and that reform does align a lot with Race to the Top, and we don't have enough time to go into all of that, So I'm just going to speak specifically about the curricular piece. So our teachers have been designing this curriculum because we made the local choice to implement Common Core before it had to be implemented during this school year. And we made that choice because we wanted to roll it out in phases. We wanted to start with our pre-K to 2 students so that it made sense then to roll it out in 3 through 5. We wanted to make it easier for our students, easier for our teachers. We kind of did a little hybrid version in middle school to begin to ease that transition. So we have all along maintained the ability to design the curriculum the way we want it. And that has been a huge undertaking. A lot of time, a lot of energy, but it has been so worth it. And how do I know it has been worth it? Because of what I see. When I go out in classrooms, I see students working together trying to design roller coasters. And I see them debating whose idea is better. I see them missing the mark and realizing that they better figure out what they did wrong, go back and try again. They're learning perseverance. They're learning to work as a team. They're learning that sometimes the quiet person on the team has the best ideas, and you better talk to that person. When I go out next week, I'm going to be at the Frederick County Fair, a wonderful local tradition. And over 5,000 of our students are going to visit the fair next week with curriculum that has been designed to give them experiences related to agriculture and science, but also in social studies, because that's another thing the Common Core does. It asks us to integrate what we're learning so that those skills you're learning in one subject get applied in another, and they make more sense. They get applied out there on the fairgrounds as you're looking at those animals and learning about the care and nurturing, so that what you're learning makes sense in a real-world situation. And that's exactly what our community business leaders have asked us to do. So we still have that opportunity. And we don't have to say that the expectations in the Common Core are the limit for us. We are always going above and beyond and making it our own unique thing in Frederick County. I talk to our students also, and I love the high school students who say to me very candidly, "This teacher was really hard. She forced us to do papers and rewrite them and do research and validate our opinion. She even forced me to represent the other view in an argument." That's the Common Core. That's part of the standards. But our teachers have taken it and made it their own and made it work for their students. And the students know, and they respect that. This summer, I visited with our curriculum writers, and I asked them what they were doing. I shared with them some of the concerns I had heard about the Common Core. They were excited, they were enthused, and they were proud. They were proud because they own that curriculum. It's theirs. They've designed the lessons. They have picked the resources. They have figured out which units it makes sense to put it into. So when I look at the implementation of Common Core in Frederick County, I see a curriculum that continues to evolve, and just like we have in the past, we will revisit it every year. We'll strengthen it, we'll adapt it, we'll make it fit what we know our community needs. Then our teachers will take that into their classrooms, and they will look at data, they'll look at student performance, and they'll make it work for each and every individual child, because that's what we do. That's our tradition. And if they want to design a test that actually aligns with the curriculum we're teaching and compare us to other states, to other countries in the world, I say bring it on, because I know that here in Frederick County Public Schools, we have the teachers, we have the students, and we have a community that supports education. We're going to do amazingly well, I have no doubt. We have a lot of data that Dr. Tenkin would be proud of already, and we're ready to push even further to make things more rigorous and challenging, because we don't settle for mediocre. We want excellent. So I will be happy to answer any specific questions you have. If you do not get a chance to ask those here, you may email me at superintendent@fcps.org. We will also be having superintendent chats sponsored by our PTA Council. We also have many community events where we want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. We want to make sure that our schools are a community effort. So thank you very much for being here this evening, for allowing me to attend. But thank you more for caring about education and for caring about the most valuable resource we all have, our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alvin. Hopefully I'll see you at the Frederick Fair this next week. Our next speaker has been the president of the 2,800-member Frederick County Teachers Association since 2005. He also serves on the board of directors of the Maryland State Education Association and the National Education Association. He was a social studies teacher for 19 years at Governor Thomas Johnson High School in Frederick, Maryland, where he taught advanced placement psychology, United States government, and American history. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in political science and his social studies teaching certification from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and a master's degree in psychology from Hood College. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gary Brennan.
Good evening, everyone. I kind of feel like a slacker. I don't have a doctor in front of my name, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. I want to thank the organizers for having this event, for inviting me to participate. I want to thank my fellow participants. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot tonight. I already have. And I want to thank the audience for coming out tonight. It's great to see a room full of Frederictonians out to discuss what we teach our kids, how we teach in Frederick County. So it really warms my heart that we're all here having this conversation. This is a hugely important topic, but it's a really complicated topic, and I think, like a lot of people here, I've been struggling with it now for 3 or 4 years, and I don't really know I understand it all. I don't think I have all the answers, and I can't definitely say it's good, it's bad, it's the best thing, it's the worst thing that's ever happened in education. It seems to be something that's caught the imagination of a lot of people, and it's triggering a lot of conversation. I think that alone means that's a good thing, and I think that's great for our school system. As was pointed out, I am a member of the National Education Association and the Maryland Education Association Board of Directors, but I don't speak for either of those groups, and my comments are really not on behalf of either of those groups. I'm mostly going to talk from my work as president of FCTA and really as a parent of 2 graduates of Frederick County Public Schools who are as competitive against the world, I think. I have a daughter in law school and a daughter at Salisbury University, and the education they got in Frederick County prepared them fantastically for college and someday, I pray, a job. But also, my wife is a reading interventionist in Frederick County. She's much more of an expert on curriculum than I am, and I've been talking with her the last number of days and having her look at the curriculum. What do you think of this reading curriculum? Do you think it's going to help kids? Because I trust her as a 25-year reading teacher to know a lot better than I do. And like me, we talked, and at times she was saying, hey, the Common Core, it's great. And other times, wow, that's a good point. This might not work. I have that concern. So like the rest of us, I think she's not finding any easy answers on this either. Most of my closest friends in Frederick County are teachers, and I have constant conversations with teachers about how is it going in your classrooms, are you able to help kids, here's the concerns I'm hearing, what are you finding, and I think those are going to be conversations we'll have the next number of years as we go through this. So I really am not here as either a cheerleader, an apologist, or an angry person about the Common Core. I'm someone who's trying to kind of figure it out. I am, however, very skeptical. I'm skeptical about the core. I'm skeptical about its implementation. I'm really skeptical about the tests that are coming related to the core, how they're going to be used, how much faith we're putting in tests that haven't been written yet, and how those tests are going to be used as we measure the success of students, schools, and we even use them to evaluate our teachers. That's an area of great concern for me. Sometimes when big policy issues come up, whether it be about taxes or education, sometimes things fall really neatly and you see everybody scurry to their usual sides. I'm for or I'm against. Common Core is very different than that. There's no predictability to where people go. When I first started looking into the Common Core, and it was part of much larger or already existing reforms like No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top, which I am adamantly opposed to, it concerned me that a lot of the funding for Common Core research was coming from the Gates and the Broad foundations, who use their huge stockpiles of money to implement the kind of changes that they're interested in education that I don't necessarily think are good for students or teachers. I'm also concerned anytime something is strongly supported by Michelle Rhee and the Students First organization. I am not a big fan. When former Governor Bush and current Governor Bobby Jindal say this is the way to go, my antenna comes up. And then, of course, Arne Duncan is cheering it along, and I am in no way a fan of what Arne Duncan has done as the Secretary of Education. However, at the same time, there are people that are saying it's terrible that usually when I hear them say something, I scurry away from them. So you also have people like Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, the Heritage Foundation, and the Cato Institute adamantly opposed to the core. So I stop and I think, okay, what's that all about? Even the sources I do trust when it comes to education policy are divided. The National Education Association, who I love and know well, support the Common Core, although they have reservations about the testing and the implementation of it. The National PTA, an organization I have great respect for, is a main supporter of Common Core. At the same time, education historian and policy expert Diane Ravitch opposes the core, and there's someone who I trust a great deal on education issues. Although the NEA and AFT leadership care about the core, I think in a way those organizations are kind of behind their, or maybe they're out in front of their members and their members aren't really there yet. At the NEA Representative Assembly this past summer, where over 8,000 members elected by the other members of the organization, there were 9 new business items passed relating to the implementation of Common Core, concerns about the Common Core, and how new high-stakes tests might be used negatively to rank schools, teachers, and students. So there's a lot of concern among the rank and file about Common Core, even though it seems the leadership had bought into it. But most importantly, a lot of classroom teachers that I talk to every day also have major reservations about the core. Like me, most teachers are struggling. All these policies come down from on high, whether they come from MSDE, our own Board of Education, or Washington, D.C., but ultimately it doesn't really matter what they are until it comes down to the teachers and the student in a classroom. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where it's either going to work or it's going to fail. And teachers are kind of struggling with what is this? How does it make sense? How does the whole thing fit together? They're unsure of how it will be implemented this year and what's going to happen in future years when the PARCC assessments come along and all of a sudden they get wrapped into this whole confusing onion as well. And it's a part of, we've had, major reform in education now since 2001 that teachers have been struggling with. No Child Left Behind evolved into Race to the Top, which is now we're going into Common Core. These things are all separate but very connected, and in the end it's teachers and students who are trying to figure these out, and parents are even more out of the loop trying to figure these things out as well. So as I have these conversations, specifically the concerns I'm hearing from teachers and some of the concerns I have myself is A, that the core is being implemented all at once, and there's not real data on how it works. I don't really understand why it's not being piloted in some places, and we're really getting some data, finding out what works or why we're not piloting parts of it before we go to the whole thing. We're not really doing reliable field tests and making necessary adjustments to the core. It's just kind of here, make it happen, and I think FCPS has been struggling with that. I think we're doing a better job than some, but I think it's still a lot to take care of all at once. Teachers don't have the time or knowledge to effectively change instruction as quickly as they would like to. They're starting this year. Supposedly, Common Core is fully online, and a lot of teachers feel they are one day ahead of where they need to be. That's not a comfortable place to be as a teacher if you're only one day ahead of your students. Teachers need a lot of training. Teachers don't have the knowledge. MSEA did a poll of teachers last year. in May. 64% of teachers across the state of Maryland did not feel adequately prepared for implementing the Common Core, and 82% of teachers believe that significant challenges remain to understand and implement Common Core in their schools. So even as late as May, teachers were still saying, I don't feel ready yet. This is always a problem when you have big, huge reform, but I think this is some of the biggest reform we've ever seen. There's also major misalignment between implementation of the Common Core and changes to teacher evaluation that was driven by Race to the Top. Starting in 2014-15, Maryland teachers are supposed to be evaluated partly by new tests based on the Common Core. No one has seen these tests. We have no idea how to set cut scores or benchmark evaluations, growth of students. And everyone admits one thing: the new tests that are coming are going to be more challenging than the tests that we've used in the past. So we're going to see a dip in student scores. We saw a dip in student scores in the state of Maryland this year because teachers were switching over to the Common Core, but the tests were still based on the old curriculum that they were supposed to be teaching. This misalignment between how we're evaluating people and what they're supposed to teach, I think, is a major problem, a major concern. I would support a total moratorium on testing until this gets sorted out. It's not fair to test students or teachers on these things until we have some time to actually find out what it is we're testing and whether it's even valid or not. The Common Core continues to focus learning and testing on a narrow spectrum of what children should be educated in. I believe in whole student education, which means the arts, phys ed. I'm a history teacher. Where's the history in all of this? I'm somewhat concerned about history and social studies, because what's in Common Core is what's going to be tested. What's tested is what's going to be taught. We've seen that from No Child Left Behind, and we're going to see that, I'm afraid, with this as well. So how do we make sure, if we're going to Common Core, that the curriculum is wide, that we're really looking at all of the students' abilities, all of what a student needs to be well-rounded and able to compete and actually be a happy person? How will the core affect special education in ELL students? The core is all based on grade level standards. I have some concern about setting standards that are all based on everybody should be here at the same time. We have a couple of Montessori schools in Frederick County, and part of that idea is not all children learn the same things at the same time, nor should they be expected to. I know that there's plans that we're supposed to be able to differentiate, but I'm not sure teachers are being given the tools and the training that they're going to need to actually make that happen. So I think that's a high bar for us as well. Another concern I had, and I've heard a couple of people talk about it, is that this to me is part of the continuing marginalization of local school boards and local control. We've often seen that the farther away the decision makers are from the actual classroom, the more harmful the decisions they make when they micromanage what goes on in the classroom. And also, there's cost to things. You know, that there were questions about these tablets. I didn't even know about these tablets and this craziness with the technology. Well, if everyone's supposed to have that, that's a huge cost. We have a problem in Frederick County even getting spending above maintenance of effort, and now there's more stuff coming down. Where is the money going to come for the technology? If Common Core is going to be as successful as we want it to be, there's going to have to be increases in technology, in training, in support, in materials. The local school system can't just absorb those costs entirely. Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to pay for these changes? My fear, of course, is that the educators themselves will pay for it because it'll be their salaries and their classroom sizes that go up. That's a concern I have. On the other hand, I've also talked to teachers and educators I respect who support Common Core standards and think that the standards themselves, not the politics, not all of that, but the standards themselves are good. Some see them as an improvement over the current voluntary state standards that we've been using, or I guess they're not even current anymore, they're gone, and that they do allow teachers to go more in depth over fewer topics. Maryland's curriculum previously was famous for being, a mile wide and an inch deep, and the core really does kind of get that narrowed down so that you have fewer topics to hit as a standard than what we used to. I think that could be a good thing because it could focus you more on actually getting people to be at mastery in those levels. They like the progression of higher order skills. That was, I hear my wife's voice. When she was talking about reading, she said she really liked that approach where you teach the skills and then what really it focuses on is kind of laddering that so that the kids, the complexity of what they're reading, what they're being asked to do changes, but it's linked back to what they did. She thought, and I trust her on this, that that was a very good idea. And so she said it's not just an unconnected list of items to teach, but a connected ladder of things to cover. She liked, and I've talked to a number of teachers who like the ability to truly share ideas and materials with educators across the country, that there really could be more of a national sharing of best practices between teachers all across the country if we're all in the same curriculum, or not curriculum standards, I don't want to get into that debate. And then also it will benefit an increasingly transient student population. Our country is becoming more and more mobile. Kids don't just move from school to school anymore, they move from state to state and sometimes out of the country and back. And so if these are internationally benchmarked, that might make it better to say that they're learning the same standards. I do think there is some sense to say that the basic standards of an American student, whether they're in Mississippi, Maryland, or Massachusetts, should somehow be aligned and should not be drastically different, although, of course, there needs to be room for some individualization. And that goes to my next point. Standards across the country are notoriously uneven. The Common Core creates a more even playing field for students who will be applying to the same colleges, jobs, and competing in a national economy and global competition. There's my yellow. So to kind of sum up, I know I've been kind of all over the place here. I do think there's some promise in this. I am really concerned. What I would hope we could convince the powers that be, which for us is the Maryland State Department of Education. Let's be real clear. The way to address the problems we have with the Common Core is not at some distant National Governors Association, which is not a body that has any real political authority. It's at the Maryland State Department of Education and our own state legislature. They still make education policy for the state of Maryland. Nobody gave up that right. And I think we need to convince them to slow down, look at this carefully, what is good about it, what isn't good about it, and how do we give support to our families, our students, and our teachers so these changes can actually make a positive difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Our next speaker Cindy's talking to me, but I can't hear her. Oh, yeah, yes. We do have a break scheduled, actually, but I'd like to wait until after our speakers are finished, if that's okay. We have another speaker who might show up a little bit later, so let's give them the chance to arrive, too. Is that okay? Okay. She's not happy with me, but we're going to go with it. Our next speaker is a senior fellow at the American Principles Project, APP, and leads its initiative to defend parental rights and defeat the progressive march against the Constitution. On those issues, the APP mission is to provide policy research and strategic help to the citizens across the country who are leading that fight. Along with Jane Robbins, he co-authored the primer, Controlling Education from the Top, Why Common Core is Bad for America, co-published by the American Principles Project, Pioneer Institute, Pacific Research Institute, and Washington Policy Center. He is a co-founder of TruthInAmericanEducation.com, a nationwide network of individuals and organizations that shed light on the Common Core system. He has testified before the legislatures in 6 states. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Emmett McRody. Pardon.
Thank you. And might just add, I'm a native of Maryland. I was born in Baltimore and raised within the original territory of Maryland. Also, to be specific, inside Washington, D.C. Well, how could Dr. Tinkin, Dr. Alvin be correct? Public education in America is good and teachers are good. I mean, all we hear over and over and over again is how countries falling apart. Education is terrible. A fellow from my work, Jeff Bell, I think this is part of the answer to that question. He says that if you look at American society, you should really look at it not as liberals versus conservatives, Republicans versus Democrat, but more elitists versus populists, whereby elitists are those who believe that a few people should manage the lives of others, and populists are those who believe that people should shape their own lives and that people, citizens, should direct government. So you look at education, and you look at, let's say, most or many conservatives, many liberals, particularly those who have the microphone kind of are in large part controlling public policy. And I think both sides have very, very intense motivations to say that public education in America is terrible and the teachers are bad and of poor intent. And the conservatives, or traditional conservatives, I'm not sure what to call it, but the elitist conservatives, they have this mantra over the last 20 years or so. What we need are vouchers and charter schools, and then all the problems will be solved. So they like to say, well, education is bad because we need vouchers and charter schools. We need this radical change. And I think the liberal elites are motivated to say, well, education is bad, and we need to pump more money into education. So kind of neither of those groups really have the true motivation to say, to evaluate things according to the facts. So I applaud Dr. Tinkin for his analysis. I want to address two parts of this Common Core things. Andy and I just got back from Indiana where we discussed these issues 9 hours straight as part of the conference. I want to just discuss two parts. How the states came to adopt the Common Core and how such a defective product could then be adopted by 45 states. All right? So this idea of having national, I'm going to try to talk fast, even though I'm not from New York. This idea of having national education standards. The national education system has been around a while. You may remember 20 years ago, there was an effort to have national history standards. It got shot down. We did a resolution that the Senate voted 99-1 to not proceed with these national history standards. And the proponents of national standards, they were subdued, but they learned their lesson, and that is really, you can't take this to the American people. So I want to walk you through that progress. So it subsisted, it continued to exist in some think tanks, notably the Hunt Institute. Around 2006, 2007, they kind of got a boost from No Child Left Behind. Around 2006, 2007, they recruited the Gates Foundation to the effort. Since then, the Gates Foundation has spent, according to the Washington Post's Valerie Strauss, $153 million propagating the idea of the Common Core. And one of the first things they did was then enlist the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers. Now, it's because of the enlistment of those two groups that we hear the Common Core is state-led. But in fact, they are private associations, privately incorporated. They take money in dues from the governors for the governors to participate in the National Governors Association, but not in their official capacities. They're also federal government contractors, grantees. And then they take large sums of monies from private entities and private foundations, as they did on the Common Core. So they started working on this project, and mind you, without a vote from the members. Not that if they had a vote from the members, it still wouldn't connote state action, right? The National Governors Association Council of Chief State School Officers do not have a grant of authority from any state. They're not subject to Freedom of Information Acts or other sunshine laws, and as Mr. Brennan pointed out, they reside, their place of business is in Washington, D.C. So it would not even be hard for any state to even assert general legal jurisdiction over either of those two entities. So from 2006 to 2008, they were working on the idea of developing a plan for national standards. This included it included working with other associations, but it did not really include developing standards. Toward the end of 2008, December 2008, with the new administration about ready to take office, and the country in the throes of economic and fiscal disaster, so we were told everything is going to fall apart, and everyone agreed we need a big stimulus bill to pump a lot of money in to save the economy. So that was going on in the end of 2008 into 2009. December 2008, the National Governors Association Council of Chief State School Officers issued a report called Benchmarking for Success. It was a white paper that was telling the incoming administration, this is what we think you should do on education. And this is what they said. What we really need to do is to, let me just quote from the specifically. The report called for a new vision for the historic state-federal partnership in education, one in which the federal government could assist states in specific ways at each stage of the journey, including by incentivizing states to, as soon as possible, offer new funding to help upgrade state standards by adopting a common core of internationally benchmarked standards in math and English language arts for grades K through 12, to help ensure that assessments are aligned to the standards, and to help ensure that textbooks, curriculum, and assessments are aligned to the standards. So this was essentially the outline for Race to the Top, and the grant vehicle that really ushered in the Common Core. Congress put into the 2009 stimulus bill $4.35 billion to the Federal Department of Education. Immediately after that was passed, Secretary Duncan was asked, what are you going to do with this money? He said, I really like the work that Gates and the Chief was the contractor of the National Governors Association, the Council of Chief State School Officers. Really like the work they're doing on national standards, and I want to be the catalyst that makes it happen. So that's how this got started, and at that point, there weren't any Common Core. It's this idea we're going to have Common Core. So then the administration floated this grant program out, but there's a couple of twists to it. It's not the usual carrot and stick from the federal government to the states. All right. The first thing is the states had to compete for the grants. It was going to be a competitive grant. Not all, they were told straight out, not all the states are going to get money. You have to compete for it. You have to compete for your own taxpayers' money. And what are the criteria of the competition? The criteria of the competition was essentially that you had to sign on to the administration's education reform agenda. And that agenda was common standards, assessments aligned to the standards, teacher evaluations that were heavily dependent upon how children did on those assessments, and the collection of large amounts of data on children. So that was one of the twists. The race to the top competition was going to be done in 2 phases. And so part of it you had to let me back up for the competition, for the standards, you had to join a consortium of states that were involved in coming up with common standards. Well, there's only one consortium around, and that was Design Government, and mentioned the one being undertaken by the National Governors Association Council of Chief State School Officers. Then you also had to join a second consortium on standardized tests. State consortia developing standardized tests. There was a separate grant competition for these consortia. There were 2 of these consortia. And so the states had to join one of this consortia. And then in their race to the top application, they had to attach the agreement with the testing consortia. Well, in that agreement, the states committed to adopting the Common Core. So you had 2 points at which they're committing to adopting the Common Core. One is by joining the consortium, submitting the race to the top application. And the second one was by joining these testing consortia. And then that agreement was actually attached to the race to the top application. So what happens, if you think of it from a civic standpoint, so what's happening at this point? In January 2009, the talking points of the Common Core were already being issued. This is going to be a great project. It's going to be internationally benchmarked, evidence-based. The standards are going to be rigorous, clearer, deeper, higher. I think it was. They had all those talking points. Well, these governors and state school superintendents were anxious to get the money. Both Republican and Democrat alike. For instance, Mitch Daniels in Indiana told his superintendent, told everyone, we're going to get as much of the stimulus money as possible. And so Indiana sitting down and looking at okay, these standards are going to be more rigorous, it's going to be state-led, they're going to be evidence-based and national benchmarks. January 2009. The problem is Sandy will get into later, the problem is none of those things turned out to be true. But starting in January 2009, you had these politicians painting themselves into the corner, talking about how great this was going to be and how their state was going to join. And then let's go through the specific timeline. So the Department of Education starts working on writing up the grant applications. They write them up, they issue them in 2009. It's going to be done in 2 phases. The first phase of applications is due on January 19, 2010. And again, in those applications, the states are signing up for committing to the Common Core and to the assessments aligned with the Common Core. And when you join the assessments, then you're committing to using the Common Core. And you're basically also saying to your assessment system, we're going to shut you down, we're not going to use you anymore. And the governors, 1 minute left. Okay, so that was January 19, 2010. The first public draft of the standards was released in March 2010. That is after the application was submitted. The second round of applications was due June 1, 2010. The final draft of the standards came out the next day, June 2nd, 2010. And then the states had 30 days in which to actually, if they had not already done that, adopt the Common Core. So, in short, this is how the states got kind of bamboozled into it, in the sense they were all victims. And they were dependent that this process, this private process to draft the standards, which was done behind closed doors by private entities, they were dependent that it would come up with a high-quality product. If it didn't come up with a high-quality product, that's kind of really on them, because they've been saying for a year and a half this is going to be a high-quality product. Real quickly, the next talker is Sandra Stotsky. She is the author of the Massachusetts standards that led to the Massachusetts miracle. He's probably the preeminent standards expert in America.
Thank you, Mr. McCordy. We're going to have one more 15-minute speaker, and then we will take a 10-minute break. Our next speaker was a professor at the University of Arkansas and held the 21st Century Chair in Teacher Quality. She retired in December 2012. She served as a Senior Associate Commissioner at the Massachusetts Department of Education from 1999 through 2003, where she was in charge of developing or revising all the state's K-12 standards, teacher licensure tests, and all licensure regulations. She served on the Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education from 2006 through 2010. She served on the National Mathematics Advisory Panel from 2006 through 2008. More recently, she served as the Common Core Validation Committee from 2009 to 2010. She has published extensively in professional journals and written several books. She was also editor of the NCTE's premier research journal, Research in Teaching of English from 1991 through 1997. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sandra Stotsky.
Thank you very much. Let me add a few more words to the historical background to Common Core standards, but I would like, first of all, to say that this is what I'm planning to do in 15 minutes, if I can do this at a speed that will be easy for you to understand what I'm saying. I can talk fast, but there's so much that needs to be added. I'm going to talk to you about what some of the flaws are in the ELA standards. They are my major area of expertise and the focus of almost everything I write. I will talk a little bit about the problems with the mathematics standards at the high school level, because as parents, you need to be familiar with some of the issues. And I certainly hope that we can hear from the superintendent on what may or may not be happening, and I wouldn't know. As we've heard, the standards are just being implemented now, so it's too early to really know what their effect is. We have no data, they haven't been piloted, and we simply have no way of knowing what's going on without looking at what's in the document. It's too bad some of the teachers might have left just now, because I would think that they would be the ones to comment a little bit more on what's happening in their classrooms. So it's unfortunate that this has happened, by the way, in every state I'm in. There's an omerta that takes place where teachers do not dare to speak up and identify themselves. In the state of Arkansas, I found one English teacher who was willing to identify herself by name. One in the entire state of Arkansas. And she has just left her teaching position this past year because she had been told publicly last year that she was not to speak about curriculum instruction in public anymore. So this is a very serious problem for teachers who wish to share the concerns they have, and I am concerned about some of the teachers sharing that problem and simply leaving because they can't speak up. But I want to give this quick historical background that I think helps to give you a sense of where this is going unless there is some more parent input and state legislative input into what is happening. And I share the concern for these unknown tests based on these very unknown kinds of standards for evaluating teachers, because we simply have no basis for holding teachers' feet to the fire over invalid standards, invalid tests, and a whole process that has not made any sense for any kind of reform we've done in education. I want to go back very quickly to what I see as the beginning of this process historically. And it starts with Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty in 1965. That's the first authorization of the Elementary and Secondary School Act, ESEA. That was an attempt back in 1965 to start focusing on low-achieving groups of children. And that was very important to do because they showed a lot of problems as a group, and there needed to be more done with them. The idea was to improve their achievement. It was not affecting, at that time, other children in the schools. It was to help those low-income children in particular. Over the years, there were several different reauthorizations of ESEA. We get down to the Clinton administration, and we have Goals 2000. Some of you may remember that. That was an attempt to start doing more with professional development and low-income children. There were voluntary teacher tests that were being, grade 4, that were being developed. I knew a little bit about them because I was reviewing some of them. But that fizzled out because Congress did not, at that time, in the 90s, did not want any tests at all. It's interesting now what's happening when you think about Congress's reaction in the 90s. Then we had George Bush's No Child Left Behind, which was another reauthorization of ESEA. So you have to see that as another reauthorization taking place. This time, everybody had to have standards, every state, and we had to have accountability built in, which seemed like a very, very good idea. But it was accountability that somehow focused only on teachers and schools. It left parents and kids out in the dark, as if they had nothing to do with what was going on, just teachers and schools with whatever kids achieved. This is a very limited notion of accountability. It also started making links to teachers in terms of the quality of the teacher. That was a positive idea, even though it might not have been carried out in the best way. That's when I began to be very active on the issue of teacher quality. Then we have Common Core, which is also concerned even more with low-performing, low-income children, and it has led to a set of standards that are designed to help get more students into community colleges, and I'm going to back up that because this is one of the issues. It is designed to get more low-performing, low-income children into credit-bearing courses in non-selective colleges. And we have the exact words of Jason Zimba, who was one of the math writers on the math standards writing team for Common Core, who said that at a Massachusetts Board of Education meeting in response to my rather provocative questions to him, please explain what college readiness means. What you have to start beginning to think more carefully about, which none of us did, and I admit that, what does it mean to have a college readiness standard as opposed to a plain old standard? Most of us had nothing but plain old standards in high schools or in K-12. Those were standards designed to have tests based on them that would determine whether students had the competencies needed for a high school diploma. That's what all state standards had been for. Common Core comes in with a new idea. It is linked to credit-bearing courses in the first year of college. But it's not the first year at MIT or CIT. It's the first year of non-selective community colleges, but it doesn't say that, because that was one of the arguments they had to wrestle with. They couldn't be honest in the document about what these standards were for. Now, how do we know what the standards are for? I rely upon the judgment of mathematicians who have looked at the mathematical topics, and then I will sort of fling out a quick question. They have looked at the topics. It's harder to tell when you look at English standards, but if you look at the mathematical topics designed for the college readiness level, which will be the level at which a test will be based that says this student is ready to go to a credit-bearing course in a freshman year somewhere, it turns out that it's less than Algebra 2. Now, what does it mean to say that you are college ready when you have achieved less than Algebra 2? What kind of a college is that? It can only be a non-selective college. 2-year, but it could be 4-year. It's certainly not a selective university or private college that expects trigonometry and pre-calculus to be taught in order to prepare students either in their senior year for calculus or in their first year of college for calculus. Anyone who knows mathematics or science knows that. The problem is most state board members of education don't know that. Most policymakers don't know that. They can't read a document that's mathematical. I can't because I'm in research and reading and in literature. And most superintendents aren't in mathematics. Most policymakers in Washington aren't in mathematics. They don't know how to read that college readiness level. But mathematicians can, and this is what James Milgram yesterday spoke about. He's a mathematician from Stanford University. He's emeritus now. He was a topologist. He is a topologist. To do with geometry. That's as far as I can go. The point I'm making is that he, among the other mathematicians in this country, can look at mathematics standards to determine what level of mathematics are those standards hitting. Now, this is important to parents because if you think you have a mathematically ambitious or talented or motivated child, there are no standards in Common Core for pre-calculus, and there are very few for trigonometry. So the tests that are going to be determining college readiness that Common Core is developing cannot assess in any way pre-calculus or trigonometry for the most part. And what they do measure, we don't know yet where the cut score will be, so we're still whistling in the dark on that one, but it is less than a full year Algebra 2 course. Now, where does that leave this country, which is where Jim and I have been having long talks? Why is it important for this country to produce students who have had at least a good trigonometry course and a good pre-calculus course, if not calculus? There are a lot of people that say you don't need to have that in high school, but at least you should be prepared for it in high school. Well, you cannot be a science major. You cannot go to an engineering school. You cannot be an economics major today, a business major, never mind a mathematics major, if you're not prepared to start with calculus in your freshman year of college. So I don't know what your mathematics department at your high school has done, but those are the teachers we haven't heard from. Nobody has asked, and I've been asking boards of education everywhere. I go around testifying to legislatures. Have you asked your teachers, your English teachers at your high school level, particularly your math teachers, because they're the only ones who can tell. They're the only ones who ever taught trig, right? I mean, no English teacher teaches trig in the high school. So you ask your high school math teachers, are you still teaching trigonometry as you implement Common Core? I don't know. We don't know. We don't have empirical data on it. The other group of people who were not on the Standards Development Committee and that state boards of ed have never invited, and this is why I'm raising the question of the legality of their vote, who should be determining college readiness? Who knows best? And this is like an open question, and then I'll give you the answer. Who is best able to decide what college readiness in mathematics is? Kindergarten teacher? A bureaucrat in Washington? Or maybe the people who teach math at the college level? I mean, that to me is logical. They were never asked. Nobody ever asked any math instructors at the college level to look at these college readiness standards, the level. You can tell by the topics. Mathematicians can tell by the topics. I can't, but they can. Scientists can tell, engineers can tell. And I've said, did any of you, and this was in Michigan last week or 2 weeks ago, 3 major universities, did you invite any of your math, science, or engineering faculty to look at these college readiness standards? You have the University of Maryland here. Were any of them asked to look at these college readiness standards to tell you whether that is indeed what you think the level of readiness is for your freshman courses? Not one board of education. Intelligent, educated people in this country, I still don't understand why not one of them ever thought to ask their own local experts, as if somebody in the Governor's Association or in the CCSSO or in Washington knows better than their own university faculty what their own admission standard should be. there is a lot of reckoning that has to be done. Now, let me go quickly through the ELA, because I may not have much time to talk about those. Those are not suitable for preparing anybody for college. Whether they're able students or not able students, they will not prepare anybody for anything, not even necessarily a high school diploma. First of all, they are content-free skills, so we don't know what the content is. After all, you can apply a skill like find the main idea to the Three Little Pigs. You can apply it to Moby Dick. Which will it be? We don't know. We haven't seen the test items. We haven't seen the passages. So they are unlikely to choose Three Little Pigs, but will it be somewhere around 5th or 6th grade level, which is where we do find from other corroborative evidence that this is where kids' reading level today tends to be, around 5th and 6th grade material. That's not college level material. It will not get anyone able to read a college textbook in any subject. The other problem, major problem, that I've spent a lot of time trying to explain is that Common Core's ELA standards require English teachers from grade K to 12 to spend over 50% of their time on informational texts, which could include nonfiction. They have a very peculiar definition. Less than 50% for literary study. There is no body of information that English teachers have ever been responsible for teaching in this country or in any other country. Unlike science teachers, who are supposed to be teaching information about science. Not so with English teachers. So we have a major problem. It diminishes literary study. It boosts something called informational text with damage. Damage to the development of critical thinking, one of the great claims of these standards. They will develop critical thinking, they will develop deeper learning, they will develop collaborative skills, they will also shine your shoes, brush your hair, and do a whole lot of other things for which we have absolutely no evidence that they can do any of it, but they certainly can't develop critical thinking, because critical thinking does not come from reading information. It comes from learning to read between the lines, which English teachers have always been very good with when they had good literature to teach kids. And then we have some of the other issues. One that's hit me now as I have begun just counting standards in Common Core. More writing than reading. And if we know anything in the 100 years of research on reading, which is my area of expertise, writing depends on reading. Reading does not depend on writing. So we have a set of misfit standards that will do the opposite of what they claim to do, but they've been sold like, I'm sorry to say this, snake oil to people who do not know how to read mathematics standards, and I'm one of them, or English standards, which I can read because I have created them. So I am now finishing and can say that I've written so much about this that you can just go to the website and find all of my details about this. But we do need to hear more from teachers in a free setting where they can identify themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Stotsky. Now, before we dismiss class, I'd like to acknowledge that all of our panelists today are coming here pro bono. They're doing this as a service to the community. Many of them came at their own personal expense in both money and time. So please, let's give them one more round of applause. I hope you all have excellent questions prepared. We'll have a Q&A session coming up in 10 minutes, so please enjoy the break.